Thank you everyone for joining today's session about introducing the ValueEdge Aviator and kind of basic orientation around that. And again, for the agenda for today will be just mentioning the motivation for supporting that and providing that as a functionality as part of ValueEdge. A brief mentioning about the license, that it requires an additional license and the notion of permissions that are required for that. Then I will demonstrate to do the two features that we already have today, which are to generate test capability and the smart assistant to be able kind of to chat with a feature. And briefly mentioning some limitations and the feedback that we get from you. Okay, so the motivation is mainly, again, as the whole idea of large language modules is indeed to accelerate the work and the deliverables that we need to provide in our daily work. So to use that also in the context and in the scope of our work, whether it is by defining features and creating tests, and later on also dealing with any other entity in the system, to be able to generate it faster with a broader capturing of anything that is needed, and by that also to improve the quality, to make sure that we are not missing out on specific topics, criteria, and so on. So to have quicker content with greater quality. And also as a means that in some aspect also deals with the notion of big data to some extent. So even in the scope or even of a single entity like a feature, as it has information sometimes quite scattered. It can be in the comments, it can be in the backlog items like the stories or the defects of it or the tests. So the idea is to have an easy way to deal and manage and work with that data and not to miss out on important data from one place. And by that kind of being on top of all the data as much as possible. So these are the main motivation and the benefits that comes with that. For an instance of ValueEdge, again, when I mention ValueEdge, at the moment we're talking about ValueEdge Agile and Quality, the backlog module primarily, where we have it implemented. So the idea that this capability is actually enforced by a license and requires a license to be available. So for SaaS, and again, this is a SaaS capability, limited capability. It's not available for on-premise. So for SaaS customers, there is a need to have the licenses in place, and that is done actually by the SaaS administrator. It's not something that each customer needs to do. Once they acquire that license and get that license, it will be done for that customer, but just then they need to be aware that it requires that license to be set and made available. And once that is in place, then the Aviator capabilities become available, and for that to truly be available, we need to check in the permission for a given role. For every role that we want to have the Aviator capabilities available. So there are two permissions, again, related to the two functionality that I just mentioned and that I will demonstrate. So for every such role, you need to permit when applicable, and I will return to that also in the limitation slide, and that also goes to the license because we have a limit on how much or how many requests and questions or interactions can a user do or can a customer do with the Aviator. So as this in a way has a cost behind each request, so it is limited. So from the customer perspective, or the organization perspective, in order not to have maybe users that don't really need that, not to exploit too much of that limit of requests, if they're not really needing to do that. So that permission also allows us to assure that the ones that truly need it get that functionality. So this is something that, again, the administrator of each organization, again, this is not a SaaS, an open text SaaS administrator. This is the workspace administrator, or the shared space administrator of a particular tenant needs to have that set for each role in order to make that available for the users. So let's see things in action, and I will demonstrate the two capabilities, the generate test and the smart assistant. So for that, I will switch to the browser. Okay, so here you should be able to see ValueEdge, the backlog module of ValueEdge. So here I have a collection of features. As I drill down to a certain feature, I can, again, have two options. Post this one for now. And one, again, is the generate test. So we get that option under the test tab, where we have the generate test with Aviator. And I can click that. And essentially what it does, it provides the large language model, the information that we have collected for the feature, to suggest kind of potential tests that we may add to set or complete the coverage. At the moment, the tests are created only by name and description. We do not yet generate the steps for these, but it does already allow us to kind of have a jump start as to see what maybe we should consider to add as a test, so we can see the items and choose the ones that we find relevant, or we can dismiss everything. And as you know, LLM is something that may produce slightly different responses with each request, so we can utilize that capability here. And once we select the items, we can add them as test. And this is a comment that we will see also later on, and I will mention it at the end as well. Again, this is not a scientifically scientific level result. It might not be completely accurate, as it is the tendency of the large language model that sometimes when information is missing, we do our best to have the model respond with the fact that there is data missing, but still it might kind of fill the blanks voluntarily. So you need to always be kind of judgmental and with a critical observation and somewhat of a scrutiny to go over the content to ensure that indeed it makes sense, or just simply go and do the adjustment yourself. So the same goes also for the suggested tests. So at the moment we suggest only manual tests. So we can add these selected tests, and they're created in ValueEdge backlog, alongside the feature that it's supposed to cover, with the indication that this is an AI suggested test, if you want to filter by or to see those. And then we can indeed, as I mentioned, we can go in each. Again, there are no steps defined, just the name and description, also indicated here that it is generated by AI, and then we can go and follow on that recommendation. Again, and then we can choose whether we want to keep the test, remove the test as we see fit. So this goes to the generate test capability. The other capability is the Smart Assistant, that it is available here on the side pane to the right. I will just start it again. Again, also here, you can see at the top, and I will mention it also later on, when we now I will demonstrate when we chat with the Aviator, using the Aviator kind of with that feature. Again, the scope is the feature that we are in. And so this is the information that is used by the Smart Assistant to provide us answers with. So we have what we call chips, kind of out-of-the-box, ready-made suggestions that you can use. And you can, of course, type your own. So, for example, I can start with suggest a marketing summary. So it will now run, fetch the relevant data needed for defining, and we at the moment take as kind of as an assumption that the description or other memo fields utilized to describe the specification. It does not yet support taking content out of attachments. So if the description or the specification is defined as an attached document, at the moment it is not yet supported. Hopefully we'll address that case later on. So we get quite an extensive marketing summary. We can continue the thread, for example, here. So rewrite the summary in just 2 paragraphs. Okay, I want something shorter, so I can ask that, and now it should work against the content and the conversation that was done so far. So here now I get another suggested marketing summary with just 2 paragraphs as I request. For every such response, again, we can have that regenerate to try again to get maybe some other possible content, or of course we can copy that information. At the moment, unlike the generate tests that the work of the large language model resulted in entities being generated, at the moment the Smart Assistant does not yet interact with the ValueEdge by already generating entities. That will come later on, something that we're working on, and that will be available down the road. So we can copy and place it wherever we need, and we can provide feedback. Okay, whether you find that response to be good or a bad response, and you can provide additional feedback. For example, it is mainly, the feedback is mainly we would want that to be related to not necessarily the creativity that we expected to have maybe from the large language model, but mainly if indeed it was relating to data that we know that exists. For example, if we wrote something in the description and it wrote something completely different, or we had defects that mention additional information that were not incorporated as you would expect. So this is like mainly the type of feedback that we would like to have. And we can start a new topic and then write something ourselves, or again keep using the chips. For example, for the idea of tests can be done also here, as we see here as a ready-made question. Again, it will not generate the tests as the generate test option that we saw, but it will provide the kind of textual representation of that. So I can write here, for example, are there any missing aspects in the features specification. Okay, so sometimes when we use that, maybe to suggest areas that we should relate to when we describe a feature. For example, here, error handling, performance considerations, cross-filter fields, and so on that we can observe and consider maybe to maybe even just copy-paste or just consider that as an option. And this is more or less the level of interaction. Again, we can continue the thread or start a new topic, and that is available for every feature in the backlog. And part of our planned implementation around the smart assistant is, of course, to have that available not just for a feature we started with a feature, but to have that available later on for other significant entities like defects and tests, of course, and with additional capabilities and functionality. So these are the features that you can utilize already once the license is set in your instance. As we saw in the information within the application, these are at the moment these are the scope. This is the scope of the data that we get by interacting with the feature. So we get a description and memo fields, comments, and the related issues, defects, stories, and manual tests. So what you write and interact with should eventually relate to that potential set of information. At the moment, it is limited to a single entity. We cannot yet kind of use the smart assistant to address or relate to multiple features, for example, or not to mention the entire system. Hopefully that will come later on as the capabilities and the features mature in that aspect. So from limitations perspective, so as I mentioned before, when it comes to the license is supposed to be at least with the user count of the organization of the customers that got that license. And with that, we permit 200 requests per user per month. So every month we reset that count. And so this is why, from permission perspective, maybe you want to make sure that only the specific users that are relevant to utilize that capability have that, for others not to exploit too much of that request limitation. Again, validating the response correctness is very much important, and to be kind of critical from a critical perspective to assure that the content is really makes sense before you have submitted or follow on that. As I mentioned, it is limited to a single entity scope at the moment. Again, the entity and the entities that relate to it, but not across multiple features, for example, as I mentioned. Also, we do not yet support attachments that may provide additional content to work with, images or Word documents and so on. These are not yet processed, but hopefully they will be supported later on. And it doesn't yet also support additional or external data sources, as sometimes this is a request that we already got, for example, to work against the corporate knowledge base or some internal documentation or some jargon or glossary or things like that. So that is also not yet available, and hopefully it will be available later on. So thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your day.